Hey, what's going on, guys? For today's Mook review, I'm actually taking a look at my very first edition of Nomoken, and this is a Nomoken Extra Edition here, Introduction to Gunpla, or the Handbook of Gunpla Modeling here for this one. So if you guys have not heard of Nomoken is short for Nomoto Kenichi, who is a just famous modeler who puts out this series of books. There's a few of them, so you guys may have seen them around. They usually have Nomoken big in English on the front of them, but this is an extra edition, and it has all sorts of cool stuff in here about Gunpla modeling, so let's check it out for today's video. So alright, here under our dust jacket, we just have kind of the titling there in black and white, minus the photography of some different Gunpla here on the front, which I'm sure we're going to see some more of on the inside. On the back side, nothing really too much here. We do have the MSRP down here of 952 yen, so well under $10 for this, which is very, very reasonable, because like I said, the Nomoken book series, as I've always heard and kind of assumed just from what I know of them, is that they're pretty good. And so this one being at 98 pages in length, just under 100 pages, seems very reasonable, the price here for this one. So first off, we've got our table of contents here. It looks like we've got some HG, MG, 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 144 scale, non-grade. That's the old Zigak, which you could see right there on the front. So it's going to cover old kits in here too, as well as troubleshooting and Nomoken's Gunpla works. So there'll be some featured other just more works of his, I guess. So although it's 98 pages, which is not super long, there is going to be a ton of stuff packed in here. So I'm not going to be able to go through exactly what's going on in every single image for you guys. I would recommend just picking this up if you're interested. I'm sure there's a lot of great stuff in here, and it's kind of meant for beginners, but I'm sure there's even, I always say this every time we look at books that are aimed towards beginners, and most books are, that even books for beginners, you can still pick up helpful tips. So even if the book is labeled for beginners, I mean, it's worth checking out, I feel like. So that's why I don't mind taking a look through these. Anyway, okay, here, so we have an opening letter there from Nomoken, and then we're right into the HG 00 Gundam, a fantastic kit, by the way, one that's definitely withstood the test of time very well, as we've seen this kit used as the base kit for a lot of even recent HG kits. So really one that I could recommend for you guys. So as usual, this is going to be starting off with the most basic of basic and just kind of an introduction to your basic tools. Nippers here, it's saying that you can use just like wire cutters, actual like professional hobby nippers. These are some Tamiya side cutters there, just some regular wire cutter nippers there again, I think, with these, or nail clippers. We got tweezers, which tweezers, yeah, are helpful for stickers, and that's kind of about it. It's not really like the most helpful beginner's tool. Toothpicks, which are also good for stickers, and then cotton swabs or Q-tips. So we've got just kind of an introduction about kind of what the different parts of the kit are. So instructions about like how to read the manual, tips on like circling stuff in the manual, also about the color guide in the manual, about the runners, about the polycaps, the stickers, just kind of an introduction. Very super basic introduction, as the title explains there. So starting off from just how to cut the parts off the runner. And so he looks like he's doing a double cut here, one cut off the runner, a closer cut with the nippers, and then over here a little bit about undergated parts as well, which this particular kit does not include, but he included that in this section there. And then about putting the parts together here, pretty simple, like a super duper basic, how to push in the polycaps and how to make sure your polycaps are in correctly in between the parts. So I mean, yeah, this is very like ultra beginner level, but I mean, that's cool. So if you were in want or in need of the most basic of beginner tips, just how to apply the stickers, again, like I said, using tweezers to place the stickers, using a toothpick to press the sticker into place. This particular sticker right here that's illustrating that on is just like a sticker over a flat surface. You don't particularly need a toothpick for that. You can just kind of press it down with your finger or your thumb or whatever. But for stickers like this that need to wrap around a object, or a sticker that especially like goes down into a recessed surface, a toothpick, in particular a blunt toothpick, don't use one that's too sharp, because then you could actually poke through the sticker accidentally, but a blunt toothpick works really well for that. Also, he's also recommending using a cotton swab too for like around the eyes. I use a toothpick for that. You have to be kind of a little bit more careful and precise, because it's a really tiny detail that you're kind of working the toothpick around. A cotton swab would also, I guess, do the job pretty well too. Just kind of press the sticker down in and around the shape of the eye mold there. So anyway, some different stuff over here, how to deal with separating some of your parts there and keeping your clear parts on a piece of masking tape. And then we've got our finished build here. So this is just the most basic of basic snap built here with just the stickers on, like that of the 00 Gundam. Okay, next up is the 144 scale HG Zeta Gundam. This would be The original HGC, not the revived version. By the way, when was this book released? 2009. So this is actually quite an old one. So that gives us a kind of general frame of reference as to what kits were out at the time, and also just kind of what the standards were at the time as well. Well, actually, let's see. This is still on the 00 Gundam. Why is the Zeta Gundam there? Anyway, here's a little bit about the HGC Zeta Gundam. But then we've got step 2 here. This one's on the master grade Exia now that we're going to be working on. So in this part, we're going to be using some more tools: sandpaper, knife, markers, and so this is like still pretty basic. So we've gone from just only using nipper to cut off the parts to now we're cutting off the parts and then also cleaning up the nubs with the knife. And then let's see, using your Gundam markers to also just to kind of help to hide the stress marks from your nub removal. And then on these gold parts, for example, again, this kit doesn't include any gold parts, but there's a tip in here about how to hide the nub marks on gold parts, for example, using a Gundam paint marker, like a gold paint marker there, which you can do. But the problem with doing this particular technique is that there's not always a paint marker available in the exact color of what you want. So while it could be like a close match and you only need like a tiny little bit of paint on there, so it doesn't really need to be super exact, you might have trouble finding a paint marker that matches exactly the color of that. So I wouldn't rely on this technique, but it can work anyway. I'm using some sandpaper here to also help to further clean up a little bit. And he's demonstrating on some, looks like a Zaku part there for some reason, but there's some cleanup and then some cleanup down here, and then also top coat. So just showing the difference between gloss and matte top coat here. It's the exact same part. So that's kind of a great illustration of how the top coat can really change the look of the part drastically here between how dark that looks and of course obviously shiny with the gloss coat, and then how much lighter that looks, and then of course has that nice matte finish with the flat or matte top coat on there. Up next here, mold lines. So yes, we're not quite to seam lines quite yet. I'm not quite to that step, but for removing mold lines, which is also something that a lot of people, I've talked about this before, even like in a lot of people's contest entries, and this is something that can definitely hurt you in a contest. So if you're ever entering in one of my contests, make sure you have your mold lines in it, because it's something I definitely look for. It's such a basic step, and as you can see here, it's covered in step 2 of the most basic of steps. So make sure that you're getting rid of your mold lines on your kits, sanding those down. They can be, in particular, often in a lot of like joint parts like this, but even on like this part's like for, I think a weapons part there, a part for the leg armor, for example, on the fingers and thumbs, for example, especially on 1/100 scale kits. A lot of the fingers and thumb parts will have mold lines on there. So look out for those, make sure you're sanding those down. And then sumie, we're going to add some panel lining now, just with again, kind of the most basic type of panel lining, just using a panel line pen or marker here. It's a panel line Gundam marker, and using a couple different products for cleanup. That looks like he's just using some tissue for cleanup for that one. Pretty much anything, if it's just panel lining directly on the plastic, you can use really any kind of anything just to kind of wipe the marker off of the bare plastic. So you can use tissue, you can just use your thumbnail, your fingernail, whatever you can use. This looks like it's like a magic eraser, like sponge type of, like plastic sponge type of tool there that you could use too. That would also work, I would think to like buff the plastic a little bit to get rid of the shine a little bit if you wanted to have a slightly less plasticky, less shiny look to it. All right, some more panel lining techniques over here. Cleaning up with a cotton swab. I'm not sure what liquid he's using with that, if it's lighter fluid or whatever, as I recently talked about in a different video. But all right, I said I wasn't going to go through looking at every single picture. It's going to make this video very long. Let's just kind of move along here a little bit. Some more about using some different kind of different color markers depending on the color of the plastic. This is a nice recap of a lot of things that I just recently talked about in my how to paint Gunpla part 3 video just the other day. Over here about stickers and decals. So you got your stickers, your dry transfers, and your water slide decals. And we're going to have tips on how to do that. So how to apply the stickers, and then how to apply dry transfers, and then how to apply water slide decals there. So, all right, here's our Gundam Exia. All done now. It's been panel lined, it's been snap built with some panel lining, and with the stickers and decals all applied. And there you go. Nice out of the box build there of the Exia. And then let's see, a little bit about how to display the kit. So for example, he's using some like double-sided tape to stick the feet down to this just kind of simple display base there, or you can stick it in a box. Make sure to dust off any dust on it. how to keep and store the kit to here too. So using like some of your plastic bags, like you can reuse. I don't really do this, but I've seen people do it. You can just use regular plastic bags. You can also reuse the bags that the runners come in. They're not sealed, obviously. You would have to tape them if you want them sealed, or just don't leave them sealed. For example, if you just like have your kit slid in there, but you can reuse your plastic bags and then like stick it in a box with some bubble wrap and your instructions and everything, and that's a easy way to transport the kit or store it. So this seems like not a very economical way to store the kit, because then you'd have to buy a bunch of these plastic storage boxes. But especially if you just wanted to transport it, if you wanted to take it somewhere with you, it's a good technique. Here's some interesting techniques for storage or travel as well here too, for how to keep delicate parts safe. So like wrapping up your rifle or whatever. This one's using like a plastic 35 millimeter film canister tube, it looks like, which are not very common these days anymore. So you probably wouldn't really be able to use that. But one thing you could also use instead of this is just a toilet paper tube. You can even cut it in half if the like full length is too long. Just like cut half a toilet paper tube. Wrap the head parts with like the delicate V-fin parts with a tissue and just kind of stick it in there. Be well protected. Or you can just like cut like a piece of cardboard or something, it looks like is what that is, and just kind of stick it around the head there just to protect your V-fin or antenna or whatever you're trying to protect there. So here's another build here of the ZOC, the HGUC kit. So I'm not really sure. So like we saw with the Zeta before, it's just kind of like stuck in between the steps. We have, here's a featured HG Zeta Gundam, and here's a featured HG ZOC build. Not really sure, but anyway, kind of cool little build feature there. So, okay. And then that looks like, it's like a fully painted build too. So, I don't know. All right, step 3 here. Now we're getting into some painting. And this is going to be on the Master Grade Zaku here, I believe. Yep, the Master Grade Zaku 2. This would be the 2.0 version. So in this, we're going to get into some more top coat and then some more painting here. It looks like, and some weathering here as well. Not fully painting, but it looks like we're probably just going to be using this for painting some individual parts, some specific parts. So there's some more about top coating over here, which we kind of already saw earlier, but there's more just kind of about top coating. And again, here's a demonstration of gloss, semi-gloss, and a matte coat. So how that's going to look, how that's going to change the look of the kit here. So really nice illustration there of about how that works. And then there's a little bit down here too, this kind of helpful chart, which you guys may have seen around online. It's a chart about like how you can use different paints, watercolor, but acrylic paints, enamel paints, and lacquer paints. So you can use like certain paints over certain other ones, and other ones you can't use over other ones. So it's just kind of this helpful chart for that. All right, so yeah, not fully painting here. Well, is it? No, yeah. This is about how to paint the sleeves parts on the Shinanju here, for example, where you have the black part and then using a gold Gundam marker and using that on there. But using the gold Gundam marker directly on there can be a little bit tricky. It's kind of more helpful to just let out some paint into a little dish and then use a fine tip brush so you can have better control. So just hand painting that gold bit there. And then if you make a little mess, you can use a cleanup pen, a Gundam marker, like a cleanup type one, to just kind of clean that up with a fine tip Q-tip there. Over here, painting the eyes and face parts of an HG Gundam here, where the part is just all molded in white. You can paint your yellow on there, paint your red below the eyes, paint the black, and then pan align it to just kind of fill out all the lines in between. And there you go. So just kind of introduction to like basically detail painting here for this, how to paint your mono eye part, how to paint this like recessed detail, and then if you end up getting some paint on the outside of where it's not supposed to be, you can either use a toothpick or a knife to gently kind of scrape the paint away from wherever you didn't want it to be. For example, using a knife here to make a line where there's not a line. So on this detail right here, for example, you have like this kind of rectangular shape, but there's no line on the bottom part of that. So he's just using a knife to make a line there so that when you paint, it's just kind of easier to paint that section. Using some gold tape over here. Looks like that is on a part probably for a V2 Gundam or something, it looks like. Oh no, maybe HG Akatsuki or Delta Gundam or something like that anyway. But it looks like here, for example, there's this gold part that has like either a mold line or a seam line or something on it. So you can use a piece of gold tape just basically along that edge to cover that mold line or seam line or whatever on there. It's an interesting technique. Never really thought about trying that. And again, the trouble would be matching the color exactly. You'd have to find tape that matches exactly the color that's in, and that I think I would imagine would be difficult. So, all right, here we're getting into some basics of painting and weathering, it looks like. So Yeah, so this is not fully painting, but using paint to kind of accent the parts here. So this is just the base color, but he's using a paint color that's a little bit off from the base color to basically simulate some kind of weathering and chipping. So painting that on there in a kind of slightly different color, and then using some different Gundam markers here to do some further kind of weathering and detailing on that, which looks pretty good, pretty cool. Anyway, so there's all that technique here. Some more just kind of basic weathering techniques over here using a few different products. And one of these, I forget what these are called. Anyway, it's like it's almost like a crayon, but it's more sort of like it's like just a dried paint sort of. I don't know exactly how to describe it, and the word's escaping me. I have one of these. I've never really used it too much, but they can be great, and they're particularly used a lot for weathering, particularly like dried mud and stuff like that, thick like dirt buildup, stuff like that on your kits. So, all right. Anyway, so here's our finished build of the Zaku 2, not fully painted, but just with some paint on it and some weathering. It looks really, really nice there. So that's really cool. Here we've got a little side feature build of the Zeong in a very cool white with red color scheme there. With a lot of additional panel lining done on that and weathering. This is obviously the HGUC long before the RG. Up next here in step 4, it looks like we're going to get into maybe some fully painting now. As we can see, our fully primered up version of the Gundam there. That's the Master Grade 2.0 RX-782 Gundam that we're going to be working on for this one. So it looks like we've got some files there and a couple of different kinds of glue. We got Mr. Cement, Super Glue, Craft Bond, Tamiya Putty here, Surfacer. So it looks like this is prepping for painting. I guess maybe the next step will be going over painting. This is basically just kind of a little bit more, slightly more advanced techniques. This is all pretty much still everything that I covered in my beginner's how to paint guide. So like removing the safety flags on the V-fin, for example, how to make sharper points here on your Zaku shoulder shield spikes there, shoulder spikes, how to separate the fingers on the 2.0 kit, so these 2.0 hands where the second, third, and fourth fingers are combined. You can cut those apart to make them separated. How to separate the skirt armor. So yeah, all pretty basic modification steps here. And then seam line removal. So we're finally getting into some seam line removal there. A little bit about that. Using some super glue over here as well. A couple of different kinds of glue that we're using here for this. For example, it's talking about how on ABS parts you can't use the Mr. Cement. You have to either use super glue or there's ABS glue as well. Which I don't know about you guys, when I've tried using ABS glue on ABS parts, I don't find that it's still kind of doesn't work that well. I don't know, maybe I'm just using it wrong or something, I don't know, but that's just my experience. Let me know if you guys have a different experience. So some more about removing seam lines over here and then cleaning up the seam line removal process. So again, something I've covered a number of times on my channel in a number of different videos. Here too about filling in some injection pin marks on the underside of this part. Now I'm not sure, this part looks like it's not a piece that would be anything visible at all. It looks like it's the inside of a Zeta's shield part or something, for example. But on the inside of parts, sometimes you have those like circle, like it's like it's very slightly recessed circle. That's from a mold injector pin, I think it's called, right? And so you can put some putty in there and then you have to sand it down. It's a difficult and annoying process. So fortunately, that's not very common, but sometimes you might have to do that. Very annoying process though, yeah. And then sink marks, I've talked about this too, on like some parts, on this particular part right here, you have like a little bit of a sink right there, a very obvious one right there on the front of that kind of head part there for the RX-782. So just sand that down to get rid of that. You can also use putty if it's like a really deep dip. You can use putty to fill that in and then sand it down. And then spraying our surfacer. So this is just a can type spray surfacer, very easy. Some modifications here, different mods that you can do to make the process of connecting the parts either easier or more difficult. For example, if you want to make a connection a little bit tighter, you can add some glue. If you want to make sure that the part's a little bit easier to take apart later, you can cut the pegs down a little bit on some of these parts. There's different things that you can do to adjust the fit of your parts. You don't necessarily have to buy any fancy, expensive products or anything for that. Ooh, here's a nice Zaku desert type here. So this is actually based off of the Master Grade Zaku 2 2.0, with obviously some very nice customization done on this, some pretty extensive customization to make the desert type Zaku. I would love an actual kit of that, would be fantastic, especially in Master Grade form, would be really cool. But here for step 5, now we're getting into painting. So we've got our kit that's all done with surfacer. Now for this painting, it looks like we're just going to be using, well, we've got an airbrush and compressor there, but then we also got spray cans. So we got spray cans, airbrush, compressor, and spray booth here. So it looks like it's going to be an introduction about how to paint with spray can. So you can do that. Like I said, I just recently covered that at length in a video, in a very detailed video and very detailed and thorough video series. So make sure to check that out if you guys are interested in that. Airbrushing is something that I'm going to be covering up in an upcoming video series. So here's an introduction to just like kind of the components of an airbrush, how the airbrush works, which is a really nice detailed illustration there of how the airbrush works. So that's pretty cool. How to like adjust, how to spray, different things to look out for when you're spraying. Practicing spraying, very important, especially when you're first starting out, just to kind of get the feel. How the paint should look when you're spraying, also how it sounds too. Like you can often also tell like if your paint is coming out smoothly. I mean, at least for me, I feel like it has a specific sound to it too. So I can usually hear when I've got the mixture too thick. It's too thick especially. Too thin is kind of a little bit harder to hear the difference there, but especially when you got the paint too thick, you can hear it for sure. But then how to get your parts ready for painting using a number of different pieces to attach, not only just alligator clips, but you can use wooden chopsticks or just like this little bottle here, for example. And then also, of course, safety, use a mask. He's got goggles on too, which is kind of unnecessary, but if you want, use goggles. Here also, make sure to wash your parts before painting. So again, not super duper necessary, but definitely recommended and helpful if you have the time. Just after you've done all your sanding and like seam line removal, mold line removal, everything, all that, just to get rid of any dust and oil and stuff on the parts before you paint. It's a good idea to wash the parts. And then here's an instruction to, again, about like how the color of primer can affect the color of your paint. So white surfacer versus gray surfacer, you can see the difference in these colors here. So again, pretty much everything that I've covered in the recent video series is here in this book. So there's a lot of good troubleshooting here. Steps for if your paint looks like this, that's wrong. If it looks like this, that's wrong. So make sure that your paint is coming out of your airbrush nice and smooth. Something I'll definitely have to demonstrate in my airbrush video is how it's not supposed to look, that I think can be very helpful. There's a little bit over here too about masking. So for example, if you have this gray part that's set within a white part, you can spray the white, and that would be the way to go, spraying the white first, mask that part, and then spray the gray part for, that looks like, I think that's the knee joint there, I believe, or that's part in the upper arm. I'm not sure exactly, but anyway. And then over here too about doing some shading. So you can do shading. This was kind of not necessarily pre-shading, but more highlighting, starting off with a gray base and then just spraying your white kind of more directly onto like the center part. So leaving the edges kind of gray, and then you get this nice pre-shaded look there, somewhat Max Watanabe style there. And then over here, it's a little bit more about highlighting here with some different techniques there. That's pretty cool. And here's our finished RX-78 Gundam there. What's featured on the front of the book. That looks really nice there. And then before the old kit, we've got a nice painted build here of the Master Grade Shinanju, which looks really, really good. And then old kit. So yeah, this will be good for you guys. Make sure to pay attention here on this old kit. There'll be some very helpful steps. So obviously old kits present their own set of issues, and so it's basically just a lot more gluing, sanding, and filing involved with these, because everything, well, not every, these kits are mostly snap fit, except for it looks like that the claws here on this particular kit are not snap fit. You would have to glue the claws there onto the Zigok here, onto our Char Zigok. So, but everything's basically just going to be two parts, like clamshell, so you have seam lines everywhere. So there'll be all sorts of different steps involved in the removal of seam lines and the cleanup of the kits, just to, I'm not even talking about like modifying the kit to look any different or look any better, but just to get it to look how it's supposed to look, just like straight out of the box. Still a lot of work that needs to go in. So this one even has, there is some modification work, it looks like, done on some of these joints just to make it a little bit more posable here, it looks like, for example. But then the painting step's going to be generally the same, but again, it's going to be more masking required, just because obviously there's many fewer parts. And so less part separation, you're just going to have to do a lot more masking. Now, I have to wonder if he chose this particular kit, because it's not a very colorful kit. There's still some pretty intricate masking involved, especially here around on the body. But a lot of the other parts don't really require too much masking there on those, but the finished kit, of course, does look very cool there. All right, so some troubleshooting. I think we're in the troubleshooting section here, I would imagine. So it's like a Q&A. Oh, okay, troubleshooting, yeah. So it's like, what do you do if this? I'll try to, without spending too much time translating all this, I'll try to just see if I can just tell from the photos what's going on. Like for here, for example, if you cut out too much, or if you damage the part with your nub removal process, just kind of stabbing into the part or something like that, or slicing out too much, you can use super glue as a way. Instead of putty, just use a bit of super glue on there, wait till it dries, and then sand it down, and it'll be nice and smooth. Especially if you're planning on painting, that works really well. If you're not planning on painting, it's still going to be kind of visible probably, so it's not a really good technique to use if you want it to be completely hidden. But if you're going to be painting and you just need it to be filled in and smooth, you can do that. A little bit here about how to fix a broken part, like a broken V-fin part. You just glue it back on. Broken axe handle here. If it's like big enough, you can stick a metal pin in there. But a lot of times, like on a V-fin, especially 1/44 scale one, it's not going to be big enough to stick a teeny tiny little pin in there. I don't know. I'm sure somebody could do it, but it would be very, very small. How to straighten out parts that are like a little bit bent or curved. You can just dip them in boiling water, really hot water, leave it in there for a little bit, and then just kind of straighten it out. So anyway, there's some interesting tips here using a compound to give that smooth, glossy look back to your clear parts if you've had to do some sanding on a clear part, for example. So some really nice little troubleshooting steps here, and little kind of extra tips. So that's certainly very cool to have. These are like kind of slightly more intermediate techniques here, but still all pretty simple, kind of basic beginner modeling steps, which would definitely be useful for a lot of you guys. But yeah, a lot of this stuff I've covered in a lot of different videos over the years. So that's it. So here we have, there's Nomoken and Nomoken 3, for example, two of the other books in the series, as I talked about here on our last page. We've got the credits, and there's another little bit there with Nomoken showing off a couple of books, and that's about it. So overall, a lot of really great stuff in here. Unfortunately, it didn't seem like there was really too much in there. I'm sure if I go back and kind of look more carefully, there's probably some steps in there which are new for me. A lot of this stuff is stuff that I've shown here on the channel in different videos, so not really too much new for me, for example, but a really great guide, a very comprehensive guide for if you're a beginner. I would say if you guys don't want to pick up this book, just check out my recent series about how to paint Gunpla using spray cans. A lot of what's covered in this is I actually covered in that video series. Now obviously there's a lot more that you can cover in a book, like in great detail. I try to kind of condense everything as much as I can, but I did try to be very thorough in that video series, but definitely check that out if you guys haven't. What did you think about this Handbook of Gunpla Modeling here from Nomoken? A great book for beginners, absolutely, especially if you're going for like from absolute zero. It goes from all the way explaining about like what all the different parts and everything are in a kit. So a very, very great book for people who are just starting out into modeling. That said, of course, it is all in Japanese, so you would have to do some translating, but it is still a pretty nice guide. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. If you guys want to check out some more model kits for yourself, check the link in the video description to USA Gundam Store. We've got all sorts of kits, as well as the tools and supplies. A lot of the tools, paints, and supplies and stuff that you saw in here, we carry here at USA Gundam Store as well. So check that link in the video description. And as always, guys, leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Make sure that you're subscribed to make sure to see more in the future. And that's it for now, guys. Have a great day. See y'all later. Bye-bye.